Hello everyone and welcome to Talk of the Town. I am James Milan. I am here today with Kathy Kemp. Kathy is a geriatric care manager, and we're going to find out, first of all, what that is, and then talk about a topic that is absolutely relevant to the majority of folks out there, as Kathy herself has reported to me before we went on camera. You know, she can never, as soon as they find out who you are, right?
That's right.
People say, oh, I have a question about my grandmother or my aunt or whoever it is. So anyway, welcome. We really appreciate your being here. And let's start with, what is a geriatric care manager and what kinds of things do you do?
I'm a geriatric care manager, but also a member of the Aging Life Care Association, which is the professional association for care managers. And that's a certain distinction that I think folks should know about, and I can talk more about that later. But in my role, the first step really is to establish some rapport, either with the older adult themselves who is seeking my help, or very frequently the adult children of an older adult, and often it's the niece, the nephew, the son or daughter, and to figure out really what they see as a problem. Everyone that comes to me has a problem, for the most part. Sometimes people will contact me and think, you know, down the road, they're planning ahead, and that's really a wonderful thing. But most people, that's not how they come to me. Mm-hmm. And so my role is to very much find out what their goal is, not mine, and problem solve how to meet that goal to, you know, for the optimal quality of life. So that sounds a little bit vague, but I do assessments in people's homes or wherever their living environment is, and see what their safety is like in that situation, and make recommendations about whether it be simple things in their environment that could change their safety there, or sometimes I will be asked, like we're going to talk about today, you know, should I really be at home? Or usually it's the child, you know, should my mother really be living home alone? How do I know? And it's a delicate balance between respecting people's wishes of where they want to live, usually wanting to live at home, and weighing that with the risks that can be associated with that. Mm-hmm. So, you know, and that's a very personal decision for each family.
Right. And
so,
it doesn't surprise me to hear, as you were saying, that, you know, it's folks like myself, because my mother is aging at the moment, and you know, I am right in the sweet spot of your client base in a sense, and it doesn't surprise me to hear that it is really more folks like me who are coming to you and seeking guidance for what to do with our own parents, and I assume relatively or more rarely, it is the older person, him or herself. Is that right? And I think part of the dynamic there, right, which I'm sure folks are turning to you to help out with, is that sense that all of us have, that we want to honor our parents' autonomy, the fact that they have, you know, done very well for however long, and may be able to for a little bit longer, but you kind of want to make these decisions before they're absolutely upon you, right? That's
the ideal situation.
So the kind of information we'll be talking about today might be very, very helpful for people who are trying to figure out, are we there yet? Are we close enough to be really pushing this, et cetera? So I think you've already mentioned it, but the first option for most folks, whether you are the elder yourself or you are a child or a grandchild who is concerned or taking charge, is, hey, can my grandfather, can my grandmother, can my mother stay in place? So what are the risks of doing that?
For aging in place, I think that as people make that consideration, it would involve one, what is the environment like, and can it be made safe, both the needs right there and then, but also thinking ahead, again, depending on a person's age. But
so how many stairs are in the house, or that kind of thing?
Yeah, but sometimes it's not as obvious. It could be, you know, how well the stairwell is lit. Light is very important. Having night lights in certain places, having a very discreet handrail next to your bed so that you can get help getting in and out of bed, and often it's just a place to let you know in the middle of the night where you are relative to the bed. And the obvious things like in the bathroom, grab bars, but there's a little finesse to it, because depending on the shower or the tub itself, there's not a one answer fits all. And so often that's a big part of my role, is to do some creative problem solving around each person's environment. And the other thing is to consider the outdoor environment too. Is it, is the driveway level? Is it broken up? That sort of thing. So that needs to be addressed to be successful aging in home. You also need to, I think, probably the biggest thing is really to be somebody who would be able to accept help. And so it's kind of an oxymoron, but really people can become more independent if they accept help. I had a client who was well into his 90s and became very high risk for falls. He'd had some. And so I recommended to him that he get handrails on his front steps, because the ones that were there were decorative, but they really weren't functional. And he said that he would not do that because then the neighbors would think he was old. So the trade-off for him, though, is he became homebound. And, who are we to say, right? It's his decision. This man had capacity to make his decisions. Live and let live. But the person who is willing to accept help will last a lot longer and be ultimately more independent than one who just wants to do it all themselves.
That is a great point, and I think one that maybe there might be a number of people out there saying, aha, that's something that I can tell mom or dad, that I can remind him or her, or frame in that way, because that's pretty compelling to think that a little, asking for a little bit of help or instituting certain kinds of changes that might imply, again, oh, I'm not as young as I used to be, actually is going to allow you fuller freedom.
Right, like if you're willing to use a walker, if it's been recommended to you, you are changing your image somewhat. It is a loss, so to speak. But if you think of the consequences of breaking your hip, hitting your head, then we're talking lack of independence, at least for a short time, if not a long time. So you have to look at the bigger picture, and I think people do respond to that, but it's not something that might be obvious.
There's something that I'm curious about before we move on to other topics that I'd really just like to get your take on, because I'm sure you have dealt with this a lot. You mentioned earlier that that you're going to meet your clients where they are and try and resolve issues, help them identify and find solutions for themselves, rather than what you think would be appropriate or whatever. And I do understand that, but I wonder, I assume that you can't quite avoid getting drawn into an essential dynamic, a fundamental dynamic that happens between, let's say, the children and the parents, where the parents are feeling very strongly that they don't want to be a burden, or they don't want to worry their children. And the children want to get the message across, please, it would be much better for us to know, et cetera. What kind of, I assume that you have to provide counsel around that on occasion. And what do you say either to the parents or the children or both to mitigate that?
Well, that is almost always the case, that there'll be some discrepancy between how the children or someone that loves the older person, what they see or what they think should happen, and the older person themselves. And so, I mean, for me, I see it's a very big responsibility to make people understand the risk and the options, and to not manage them. I hate the name care manager because I don't manage people, but I want them to understand what their options are and empower everybody to have the knowledge before they get too far into digging in their heels about their stance on things. But ultimately, my responsibility is to the older adult, even if it's the adult child that has hired me and is paying me, and that's often the case. But you know, I'm a clinician first, and I will. There are certain boundaries that I will draw if the situation is too unsafe, then I won't. I'll need to step up a bit further. So I won't hold back on telling people what the situation is, but for the most part, I will support them around that and sometimes in a modified way. It's often a lot of compromise and baby steps. Adult children want everything to be fixed right away, and it doesn't work that way. You know, it really works well when people understand that I'm their ally, and I may differ from many in that when I do my assessment, I would love to go in and do assess their mobility and their functioning and their cognitive status and know what their financial situation is, on and on, but that can be quite threatening. So usually my assessment initially is limited to the task that we have at hand at that moment. And once we have rapport, you know, it's important that I have a bigger picture if my role expands. So often someone will hire me to help them with their long-term care insurance claim. Should I make the claim? How do I get it approved? How do I manage this mountain of paperwork and things like that? So that may be our business, but then it could be a couple months later, or while I'm there, I may notice something and ask, you know, is this a bit of a problem, or it grows. And so then I may take on many different roles with people. And for some clients I have, they don't have anybody else. So, you know, I'm like the surrogate family member, but with an expertise, so it's a little different. But.
Right, and for so many of your clients, for so many of us, we just have to deal with this on a couple of occasions in our life. You know, and so for most of us, it's uncharted territory. And,
absolutely.
You're really not even aware when you engage the services of a geriatric care manager or somebody similar, exactly what it is that what the parameters are of what you're going to need. And
that's right.
So that makes a lot of sense. You know, we were talking about aging in place or staying in the home, and I'm curious to know, I think that there's a whole range of options for how to do that, which go from making the modifications, you know, relatively minor that you were talking about before, of handrails or better lighting and stuff like that, all the way through to, you know, hiring somebody to come in to provide a certain level of care for a certain number of hours a day, et cetera. But all those are, you know, within the realm of, okay, we can keep mom or dad, you know, in the house where he or she wants to be. What are the signs when you know that, you know, that's just not really going to be a viable option moving forward? Are those signs always to do with safety, or are there any number of other things as well?
There are many things. Most of them, if you trace them back far enough, have to do with safety. I'm working with a couple right now that have a beautiful home in Newton that they love, and they've lived there for their whole married life. They raised their children there, but the husband is starting to have some cognitive decline that he's noticing, and the wife has some physical disabilities that are quite limiting. And so for them, they're considering this choice. Right now, there's really no risk at all, but down the road there will be. But the husband in particular said to me, if I live at home, I'm not going to be able to keep myself from doing the things I always do. I love to do the yard work. I love to do this and that, but it's really getting hard, and it's, you know, if I mow the lawn, then the rest of the day is shot. but I won't let it go. I won't let anything go. And he knows this about himself. So he's moving in that direction. Usually it will come from the adult children or the equivalent, and they will see things that maybe the older adult themselves doesn't recognize.
So there are, like, it sounds to me that if you are dealing with, you know, the direct population who's affected, which is the older adult, a certain amount of self-awareness can be very helpful in terms of making these decisions in time. But I also, I wonder when it is the younger generation or the younger person who's having to make this assessment or be helped in making that assessment. What are the kinds of things, again, that are clear red flags?
Yes. Well, it can be things like noticing scrapes or dinks in the car, or certainly full-blown accidents is one thing. Of course, that's just transportation. But if you notice that the bottoms of their pans, pots and pans are scalded, you know, evidence that they're forgetting to manage the stove correctly. If you see stacks and stacks of bills and paperwork on the table, often that's a sign of maybe some cognitive decline, in a sense that it's hard to differentiate what's important and what's not, or what is a scam, and that's a whole other ballpark. You know, they're afraid to act on it because they don't know if it's real. And for folks with memory problems, that piece of paper has some information, and for them, basically, if they throw it away, for functional, I mean, basically that information is gone. So it's much harder. Having those things prompt people to keep the information in their mind that they may otherwise lose. So there's a lot that goes behind that. Obviously, if you're noticing bruises or scrapes.
So these are all things that you might, that an observant, you know, again, younger family member, I'm just going to use that as the model. I understand that there are any number of situations. But let's say the younger family member can be observant about these various signs. Is that, I'm wondering, how much self-reporting do you find among your older, you know, older clients, or are people going to have to kind of rely on that kind of observational information, because they're not really going to be hearing from their parents that I did nick, you know, I didn't.
I would say you're describing the majority of people, either because they don't want to tell, or they don't recognize it themselves. And adult children may notice that there's a lot of expired things in the refrigerator, or that they don't have much food at all, or that the choices, you know, they're no longer cooking, but they're, what they've defaulted to is concerning for health reasons. Another big one is to, if there's any concern that they're misusing their medication, either they're forgetting, or they're taking it at the wrong time, or you know, taking 2 pills, are they remembering what they're doing? And so that's a big one. And the older adult themselves very rarely, sometimes they will. I mean, they may have like 14 bottles on their coffee table, and they'll say, I can't make heads or tails out of it. So that's a sign that they need some support. Though at home, there's all kinds of solutions for that people usually say no. But you can get bubble packs from the pharmacy. There's machines that can be programmed to drop the pills you need down at the time, bell rings, and you know, you know if you've taken it or not, and you can only take the correct amount. So, but people
are resistant to that, though.
Usually, yeah. I mean,
again,
it varies.
it's another assault on their autonomy. Is that how they're interpreting that, really?
Well, and often there's so many ways that they maybe no longer have control. So what things they can take control of, they're going to hold on to, you know, hard, and that it all makes good sense. But the medication is, you know, a very big reason that it may be time to go somewhere where you're going to get a little bit more support, or if you're not able to recognize and respond if the smoke detector goes off. If you're not willing to use a lifeline, or if that's too confusing, the history of falls is important too. Like, if they fell, was it because they tripped on the rug, and then you can remove the rug and have that in mind. But if they're falling because they're orthostatic and they stand up too quickly and get dizzy and fall, you can't usually you can't fix that. Or if somebody's impulsive, moves too quickly, which is some people's nature, and it's not going to change, that would be a clue that maybe you need to be somewhere where more people are around. I mean, you can fall no matter where you live. That's the bottom line. But
it's a lot better if somebody's going to notice.
Yeah.
And notice quickly if possible.
Sure.
So let's talk about that now. There are lots of options. We've discussed in some detail the different ways in which somebody could stay in their chosen place of residence. But at that point when, it just needs to be the case that they move into some kind of other facility. I know that there are a whole range of options for that, from independent living all the way through to kind of memory care facilities where you're getting, and what people think of as old-time nursing homes, et cetera. So walk us through, if you don't mind, just what those options are and how people can figure out what the appropriate entry point is within that range of options for their loved ones.
Sure. Well, the least restrictive, shall we say, environment would be the independent living, and people join a community where there are people like them living all around them. There's usually opportunities for social interaction. Often there's transportation around town, so if someone's not driving, they can get some support that way. But it's very much just like living in the community. There's no built-in services, but often people will choose that environment and then hire. Maybe they do need some help with getting in and out of the shower or having, various tasks. They could just private pay and have them come in. Some independent living folks are able to get meals if they are part of a community where there may be assisted living on part of it and independent on part, and then they can choose, they can buy a certain number of meals or buy into meals or not. So that's often the first step for people sometimes. Assisted living is, people usually live in either studios or one-bedroom or two-bedroom apartments, which are really hard to get. And with your package comes 3 meals a day, medication management. So someone will bring you your medication at the right time and the right dose, unless you can demonstrate that you can do it independently and you choose that. So you get your meals, you get your room and board. They'll vacuum and clean, I think usually every 2 weeks. They'll do your laundry. And that's most of the care that you get. There's a lot of social activities. They'll all have social things going on all day. And there's limited transportation, sometimes to medical appointments, but usually just within that town and on a certain day, so it's somewhat limited. And there's a bit of I think people often have the wrong idea about assisted living in thinking that they get a lot more medical oversight or just more care management that doesn't, that is not what a traditional assisted living provides. And so often people move in and then they find out, the adult children are thrilled, right? Dad's in assisted living. We don't have to worry about, well, all we have to do now is visit. Well, it's not true. I mean, they don't manage your medical appointments. They don't, if your glasses break or, various things, that's not their job.
Right, it sounds like it's a lot more kind of practical and logistical scaffolding that they provide. Again, somebody to come in and make sure that the medication is happening in the right dose at the right time,
Yeah.
et cetera, and then you've got your meals paid for, et cetera, but it doesn't seep over into the medical care to
Right.
the same degree that people might think.
Yeah, I mean, they will let you know that there's nursing on staff, but basically the way what they're allowed to do is very minimal. So they do basically first aid, or they can recognize if they need to call the doctor, the person's doctor, or an ambulance, for example. But they don't do hands-on kinds of things. So that's often a disappointment, but that's how it is. And then memory care is for folks that obviously have memory impairment, or sometimes histories of head trauma or other conditions that would make you prone to maybe getting lost in the community, or leaving the house at the wrong time of day. Often it's because of behavioral challenges, shall we say, of whether it's an outburst or losing your filter and saying things that could be upsetting to people. But the benefit of there's a lot of good in the memory care, in that there's more staff, there's much more support. They're going to be much more tuned in to, how much you ate. They'll know that if you ate your meal or not, and so sometimes people don't want to make that move, but usually you get a lot more in certain ways, and they'll have a full range of activities too. And the real difference, though, is those are what's called secure units or communities, and so a person cannot just walk out the door. They can leave with family or friends, but they can't just walk out. And the next step could be a skilled nursing facility. And people pretty much know what that is, but that's the right environment if you need skilled care. And those nurses obviously will. They'll dress your wound, they'll give you insulin, these sorts of things. And sometimes your situation will just demand that.
And each one of these levels of care, as you've just described, I assume is going to involve more expense because you're providing more support. So therefore, they're more expensive options, each one of the levels you just mentioned.
Yeah, in general, but it could be that someone's living in assisted living and having to private pay for many things, and they end up paying more than if they were in assisted living, if they were able to meet that need. But it's really important to, when I often work with people who, once they've decided to make this step, figure out what services, make sure they know what will be provided, and not have it be a setup. So, and you really need somebody. If you yourself could advocate for yourself, but often folks that move there may not, for a number of reasons. And you need somebody to notice or stand up for you if you're not getting the showers that you want or need, or various things that are a little bit soft. You can't, it's not on a written agreement. It's part of your care plan, but you need somebody, to
Paying
be
attention,
watching, just
right.
like everything else. So,
and that, I'm not sure if that fits right within your ambit as a geriatric care manager, but that does anticipate my second to last question, I think, and that is, you've provided us with a wealth of information today. I bet people are curious, hey, how can I, avail myself of these kinds of services and this kind of knowledge base, et cetera? So how does that happen? How do people, engage you or a geriatric care manager in general? How do you find them?
Folks come to me usually by referrals, either word of mouth or from financial planners, elder law attorneys, the Aging Life Care Association webpage, the Alzheimer's Association webpage, within my community affiliations. So there's lots of ways they come to me, but if you were thinking of hiring one, what I would suggest is you could ask your friends if they have somebody they like, but also go on the website for the Aging Life Care Association, and they will have, there's a button you can press, find a care manager, and you put your location, and then they will present you with care managers. The first category will be the advanced members, then they have the professional members, and then they have associate members. So it's telling you a little bit about their credentials and their experience. And you can read about what their specialties are. Most people will have a photo up there. So you can get a feeling for what they're like. But I really would encourage people, to go on their websites and really dig a little deep for what you're looking for. So as an occupational therapist, I think I'm often people will say, I chose, I'm calling you because I want an OT, because they know that, stereotypically we're very pragmatic and creative, in terms of where our mindset's coming from. But if it's a case that involves enough complicated medical things, I would be able and willing, it hasn't happened yet, but to refer to a care manager that's a nurse, for example. Sometimes if the issues are mainly conflict with family and the older person, we all can do that as care managers, but it may be a case that screams out for a social worker. I mean, I'm a licensed social worker, but I never practiced in that arena, and I have no problem referring my clients if there's a special thing that needs to be addressed. I can make referrals to people I know and trust, so differently than if you're out there yourself. Like, how do you choose a private pay physical therapist? What's the difference between these two agencies? That kind of thing.
So, very useful information. We are basically out of time, but I do need to ask you one more question and just ask you to give me a brief answer, and that is, you and I, thank goodness, are not yet ourselves in this situation, but what, through your work and your experience, have you learned that you're going to do a certain way when you get to be one of these elder people?
I do worry that I'll be one of these people that doesn't want any help, which is the worst.
Even though you know better.
Oh, I know better, but I can relate and understand to that. Understand that. So, I think that probably the best thing I could do right now is plant seeds so that I have community, and make sure I'm living in a place where it's accessible to people who may come into my home to help me. And I think the socialization is the best medicine of anything. So I guess that would be my plan.
Thank you. And with that final bit of wisdom, we want to thank Kathy Kemp for joining us today, and thank you for listening in, and hope that you have taken something from this that you can use as you make decisions in your own lives. Thanks again for joining us. Thank you. This is James Milan, and this is Talk of the Town. We'll see you next time.